Joining me now, I'm delighted he's with us, Matt Whitaker, former acting attorney general under President Trump. Matt, now, according to CBS, there are two parts of this investigation. One part concerns the efforts to swap out electors, one by Biden in several battlegrounds. Another is examining the actions surrounding January 6th, when the supporters overran the Capitol. Have you seen any evidence, Matt, that Trump could be in any type of legal jeopardy, criminal jeopardy under these two broad understandings of where this investigation is going?
Yeah, I have not, and I'm glad to be with you. And your introduction in the monologue was spot on. That's exactly what the left is trying to do here. I was shocked by what Merrick Garland said. Essentially, leaks were given to the Washington Post the day before his interview, and instead of saying, I can't confirm or deny the existence of an investigation, or I can't talk about ongoing investigations, he gave the left exactly what they are demanding from him, which is essentially he pretty much confirmed Donald Trump is under investigation and we should rejoice. These people are sick, and it's just really sad to see the Department of Justice be taken to this level of political persecution. They did it in 2016 with the Russian collusion hoax. Then Congress took over with the two impeachments, and now they're working together and colluding with Congress and the Department of Justice to try to finally come up with some way so that they don't have to oppose him in 24 if he decides to run.
Now, Obama's former Solicitor General, Matt, Neil Katyal, had an interesting read on Garland. Watch.
This is the kind of guy you want running that prosecution, an attorney general who's not bloodthirsty, who's cautious, who's incredibly respected both by Republicans and Democrats, approaching it like the way a true Justice Department prosecutor would, in the most sober, careful way possible.
Fascinating. That's exactly what they said about Robert Mueller, is it not?
Yeah, it is. And I mean, Neil pretty much just needs to put on a red nose, because that's exactly what he is. What he's saying and what he's not saying is that actually Merrick Garland is probably one of the most partisan people that could have possibly been picked for that job, because remember, the Republicans are the one that held back his Supreme Court nomination. And I guarantee you that in his mind, he wants to pay back the Republicans like Chuck Grassley and others that didn't allow him to sit on the mighty Supreme Court. And so Neil Katyal is a complete leftist. Everything he says is in support and admiration of, Marxist and left-wing ideology. And I wouldn't, believe a single word he says when it comes to vouching for somebody like Merrick Garland.
A friend of mine who's not really a big Trump fan texted me today saying I'm basically annoyed about Trump not telling people to come out of the Capitol sooner, but the idea that this rises to criminal intent to try to overthrow the government, it's just, I can't believe he said laughable. So Don Trump Jr. was against the plan, but the president was for some kind of plan which has no specifics. I mean, the whole thing is just, it's like La La Land.
It is. They're looking for any set of facts that they can prevent. Again, the existence of an investigation is bad enough if you're a political candidate, and so that's what they're trying to do. Obviously, they hope for a prosecution, but ultimately, Donald Trump, like he has since he came down the escalator, has fought through all of these nonsensical attacks. And, like he often says, that, they're not after him, they're after the people that he represents and, it stands in front of. So, I'm glad that he's willing to take up this fight. He's right. He could walk away and all this would go away, but he's not going to.
Well, Business Insider pointed out that Trump, in his tweets, they made a big deal about this, avoiding the phrase, the election is over, in his tweets, where he accused the vice president of not having courage to overturn the election. They're saying that these examples suggest a certain kind of intentionality, Matt, for a particular outcome. That's Robert Weisberg from Stanford. Yeah. Is a tweet, a phrase not used in a tweet, that's now intent to commit a crime? I must have gone to a different law school. I know Stanford's a fantastic law school, but I must have missed that in law school.
I I missed it as well. And, you know, to me, it's really interesting that, you know, the left after 2016 in the election, they said how Donald Trump was illegitimate, how he knew he was illegitimate. And, you know, this went on for, you know, in fact, the president sent out a truth that said for 10 minutes, showed these clips. And, you know, when the shoe's on the other foot, they immediately do these kind of things, suggest that somehow not saying the right words is evidence is the mens rea for a conspiracy to commit a seditious treason. I mean, it's nuts, and it's too bad that we have to talk about this. But I think, you know, people that support President Trump, or even they need to know the truth.
Matt, thank you. It's great to see you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.